The kitchen knife paused mid-chop as Elena's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper. "Peek one more time. Boy, and you're dead." I stood frozen in Marcus's kitchen doorway, caught watching his mother work at 2 a.m. "I'm blind. Trust me," I managed. And something shifted in her expression. She actually laughed soft, surprised, vulnerable. That was 3 weeks ago. Now Marcus was gone. Elena's rules were bending. And we both pretended not to notice how our scheduled encounters kept running. Past midnight. Every morning she left me lists. Structure, she called it. Control slipping, I called it. Tonight's list had only one item: 7 p.m. to practice being vulnerable. My hands were already shaking. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. I had been living like a ghost in the Morrison house for 3 weeks now. After dropping out of engineering, a decision that still twisted my stomach when I thought about it too hard, Marcus had convinced me to crash in his spare room while I figured things out. But existing under Elena Vasquez Morrison's precise household management was like trying to navigate an invisible maze where all the walls kept shifting. She ran her home the way I imagined she ran her law firm, with ruthless efficiency and an attention to detail that bordered on military precision. Everything had its place and its schedule. Breakfast dishes cleared by 7:30. No shoes past the foyer. Laundry on Wednesdays and Sundays. The rules weren't written down anywhere, but breaking them earned you one of those looks that made you feel about 2 inches tall. I tried my best to fade into the background, to disturb nothing and leave no trace. Elena barely seemed to register my existence beyond delivering the occasional new regulation with the same clipped tone she probably used on first-year associates. "The recycling goes out Thursday mornings," she'd say without looking up from her laptop. "Or please remember to turn off the kitchen lights when you're done." Never hostile, just efficiently distant. You know those people who seem to vibrate with constant motion, like they're afraid stillness might swallow them whole? That was Elena. Always moving, always organizing, always in control. From her perfectly pressed suits to her perpetually active calendar, chaos didn't stand a chance in her vicinity. "I'll be gone next week," Marcus announced over dinner. Through a mouthful of the meal service dinner Elena had precisely portioned out. "Tech conference in Austin. Mom probably won't even notice I'm missing, right?" He grinned at Elena, who offered a small smile without looking up from her phone. Later, I helped Marcus pack while stealing glances through his open door at Elena working in her home office across the hall. Even at 9 at night, she was still going, tapping away at her keyboard with perfect posture in her desk chair, hair pulled back in that severe bun she always wore. I wondered if she ever actually stopped, or if she just powered down at night like a robot and recharged for the next day's endless march of meetings and minutiae. That night, like most nights lately, sleep proved elusive. My mind kept spinning with all the what-ifs and should-haves that had led me here, camping out in my best friend's house like some kind of charity case. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up and headed downstairs for water. I made it 3 steps into the kitchen before freezing in place. Elena sat at the kitchen island, but she looked nothing like the carefully controlled woman I was used to seeing. Her hair was down for the first time since I'd moved in, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. Legal briefs were scattered around her in a way that would have horrified daytime Elena, and she was nursing what looked like a generous glass of red wine. The soft glow from the under-cabinet lights caught the slight shine in her eyes as she stared at nothing in particular. I stood there, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. It felt like stumbling across something secret and wild, like catching sight of a deer in your backyard and knowing the slightest motion would send it bolting away. This Elena was a stranger to me. No perfectly tailored suit, no BlackBerry in hand, no precise movements. Just a woman sitting alone in her kitchen at 2 in the morning. looking more human than I'd ever seen her. The moment stretched out like honey, sweet and slow and heavy with something I couldn't name. Then a floorboard creaked under my foot, and her head snapped up. For a split second, before her usual mask slid back into place, I caught something raw and vulnerable in her expression that made my chest ache. "Jamie," she said, her voice slightly rough, "I didn't hear you come down." I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, unable to look away from this transformed version of Alina. Her reading glasses perched low on her nose, nothing like the severe pairs she wore during daylight hours. Her shoulders had lost that rigid set I'd grown used to, relaxed in a way that made her seem younger somehow. Every few minutes, she'd sigh at whatever document held her attention, a small, frustrated sound. That felt startlingly intimate in the quiet kitchen. The wine glass at her elbow was nearly empty. Legal papers spread across the island in a way that would have horrified daytime Alina, some pages marked with sticky notes in different colors. She'd twist a strand of hair absently while reading, then catch herself and smooth it back, like old habits fighting with new freedom. I should have backed away. Should have retreated upstairs and left her to this private moment, but something about the scene held me there. Maybe the way the under-cabinet lights caught the silver threads in her dark hair, or how her fingertips traced lines of text as she read. When she finally looked up and noticed me, her voice carried that dangerous low tone that always made me want to apologize and run. "Jamie, this is becoming a habit. I'm sorry. I was just, if I catch you peeking one more time." She let the warning hang there, but something shifted in her expression when I responded. "I'm blind, trust me." The words came out before I could think better of them, and then Alina laughed. Not the polite chuckle I'd heard her give clients on the phone, but a real laugh that transformed her entire face. Laugh lines I'd never noticed before appeared around her eyes. The sound was rich and warm, like the wine in her glass. Without asking my age, something I was acutely grateful for, she reached for a second wine glass from the cabinet behind her. "Since you're already here," she poured generously, "maybe you can help me make sense of this brief." I settled onto the stool next to her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I don't know anything about law. Fresh eyes sometimes see what tired ones miss." She pushed a document toward me. "Tell me what stands out." We started talking about her case, something about corporate liability that went mostly over my head. But the conversation shifted naturally to other topics. When she asked about my engineering dropout decision, I found myself telling her things I hadn't even told Marcus. About the growing panic attacks during exams, about lying awake wondering if I was wasting my life pursuing the wrong dream. Somnius. "An old friend of mine, too," she said softly, refilling our glasses. "Started after Thomas died. Some nights it feels like the quiet might swallow you whole, doesn't it?" I nodded, recognizing that same emptiness I'd been fighting, like being the only person awake in the world, except tonight. She smiled, a small, genuine thing that made her look softer around the edges. The conversation flowed with surprising ease as darkness gave way to pre-dawn gray. Alina spoke about law school, about choosing career over comfort, about the satisfaction of winning impossible cases. I found myself sharing childhood stories, my secret dream of maybe teaching instead of engineering. The way numbers had always made more sense to me than people. When the first birds started their morning songs outside, Lena looked startled by how much time had passed. I watched as she quickly began gathering her papers, her movements becoming more precise again. The careful mask of professional Alina rebuilding itself piece by piece. But not before I caught something in her expression, something raw and lonely that mirrored exactly how I'd been feeling these past weeks. That same sense of displacement, of not quite fitting into the space you're supposed to occupy. For just a moment, our eyes met, and I saw my own insomnia reflected there. My own questions about purpose and belonging. Then she straightened her shoulders, pushed her hair back. And the moment passed like mist burning off in morning sun. I woke with sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. Momentarily disoriented. In Marcus's childhood bedroom, the digital clock read 11:15 in the morning, hours later than I usually slept. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Marcus. Conference connections are insane, man. Extending another week. Mom okayed it. On the kitchen counter, I found a note in Elena's precise handwriting, the kind that looked like it belonged in a calligraphy museum. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for legal correspondence. Jamie, since you're clearly catching up on missed sleep, I've adjusted today's schedule. Please review the attached guidelines for the coming week. Attached was a detailed itinerary that made my engineering syllabi look casual. Mealtimes were blocked out in 15-minute increments. There was a suggested workout routine. The gym equipment in the garage is gathering dust. Designated reading hours with a list of books from her library start with Steinbeck. And even optimal times for household chores. I should have felt suffocated. Instead, I found myself studying the schedule, noting how carefully it was constructed. The workout times aligned with when I'd heard Alina using the treadmill. The reading hour coincided with when she usually had her evening tea. Even the meal prep times created natural overlaps. The house felt different now, knowing it would be just the two of us for another week. Charged somehow, like the air before a storm. Every room seemed to hold its breath, waiting. I started following her schedule. More out of curiosity than obedience. Morning coffee became a silent ritual. Elena reading briefs at the kitchen island while I worked on crossword puzzles. Neither of us speaking, but somehow comfortable in the quiet. She'd occasionally slide the cream closer when my cup ran low. Or I'd refill her mug when she was deep in concentration. Evenings were different. She'd order takeout always, exactly at 7:30. And what started as casual dinner conversation would transform into cross-examination. The first time it happened, I'd made an offhand comment about preferring Fitzgerald to Hemingway. Defend. That position, she'd said, turning those attorney eyes on me. I just like his writing better. That's not an argument. That's an opinion. Give me evidence. Specific textual examples. Compare their technical approaches to narrative structure. And somehow I found myself really thinking about it, breaking down my casual preferences into detailed analysis. While she picked apart every point like she was before the Supreme Court, it was terrifying and exhilarating. No one had ever pushed me to examine my thoughts so thoroughly. Alina maintained perfect control over everything: the house, the schedule, the conversations. Until the summer storm hit, I was in the living room during designated reading hours, working through East of Eden as instructed when the first thunderclap shook the windows. Alina appeared in the doorway just as all the lights went out. There? Our emergency candles in the kitchen, she said, her voice tight. Third drawer from the dishwasher. I found them by phone light, thick white pillars in glass holders. When I returned, Alina had pulled the curtains back. Lightning illuminated her face in sharp bursts, and for the first time, I saw something like uncertainty in her expression. The power company estimates 3 hours, she said, checking her phone. Though their accuracy rate is questionable at best. Her voice had that same controlled precision, but her fingers worried the edge of her sleeve, a gesture I'd never seen before. I arranged the candles on the coffee table, their warm light creating shifting shadows on the walls. Alina stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the storm like she could intimidate it into submission. "We're off schedule," she said finally, still not looking at me. "The reading hour is nearly over, and dinner preparation should begin in 12 minutes. I think we can call this a force majeure," I said. Using one of the legal terms I'd picked up from her briefs. She turned then. And in the candlelight, I caught the first real crack in her perfect armor, a smile that was both amused and somehow lost a valid legal argument. Though I suppose that means we need to establish new protocols for acts of God. I watched as she moved to sit on the couch, her usual graceful control slightly undermined by the way she kept glancing at the darkened corners of the room. The storm growled overhead, and I saw her shoulders tense at each rumble. The storm's fury intensified outside. In here, the candlelight created a strange bubble of intimacy. Elena's wineglass caught the flickering light as she traced its rim with one finger, her other hand still fidgeting with her sleeve. "The lists," she said suddenly, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "They're not actually about household efficiency." I stayed quiet, afraid any response might break whatever spell had allowed this confession. The thunder rolled again, and Elena's fingers stilled on the glass. After David died, my husband, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. The list started as a way to keep functioning. Get up, shower, eat something. Basic tasks that felt impossible those first few weeks. She took a careful sip of wine. Then they became a habit. A shield, maybe? If everything has a proper place, in time, there's less room for uncertainty. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face in stark relief. For a moment, I saw past the polished attorney exterior to something raw and familiar, the same lost feeling that had driven me from engineering, from the neat path everyone expected me to follow. "I haven't been alone with any man since the funeral," she continued, her eyes fixed on the candle flame. "Not really. Clients, colleagues, that's different. Professional settings have their own built-in structure. But this," she gestured vaguely at the darkened room, at the strange intimacy of our situation. "I'm not good at vulnerable." "Neither am I," I admitted, recognizing my own defense mechanisms in her words. "Maybe we could practice together." The words hung in the air between us, weighted with possibility. Elena's breath caught slightly, and she finally looked up from the candle to meet my eyes. Something electric passed between us in that gaze: recognition, understanding, and something else I wasn't ready to name. Time stretched like honey, thick and sweet and dangerous. Then, with deliberate slowness, Elena reached across the coffee table. Her hand brushed mine where it rested near my forgotten book, the lightest touch. Barely there, but it sent sparks racing up my arm. A question in the contact, in the way her fingers hesitated against my skin. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. The touch lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. The air, the light, the space between us. All the careful structures we'd built seemed to shift and resettle into something new. A sudden humming filled the house as power returned. Fluorescent brightness flooding the room. Elena stood abruptly, smoothing her silk blouse with hands that trembled slightly. I watched as she visibly gathered her composure, rebuilt her professional armor piece by piece. She moved to the kitchen counter where tomorrow's list waited, already typed and printed. Taking a pen from her perfect chignon, she added a single line at the bottom. I couldn't help following her graceful handwriting as it formed the words: 7 p.m., continue practicing. At the kitchen doorway, she paused. Looking back over her shoulder, her expression made my breath catch, uncertainty warring with anticipation. Professional distance cracking around the edges to reveal something warmer, more dangerous. Then she was gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs, leaving me alone with the guttering candles and the ghost of her touch still tingling on my skin. At exactly 7 o'clock, I found myself standing outside Elena's study, hand raised to knock. The door opened before I could, making me wonder if she'd been waiting just as anxiously on the other side. "Come in." Her voice was steady, but I noticed she'd changed from her work clothes into a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. "I thought we could use the sitting area," I followed her to the leather couch where she'd already set up 2 glasses of water. No wine tonight. This was deliberate, intentional. My palms started sweating. Before we begin, Alina said, settling onto one end of the couch, I want to set some terms. She tucked one leg under herself, a casual pose that contradicted her lawyer-precise tone. If we're going to practice being vulnerable, we need rules. Of course we did. I smiled despite my nervousness. Let me guess, you have a list. Don't mock my lists, she said, but her eyes crinkled slightly. This is simple. Each evening, we share something real. No deflecting, no hiding behind clever remarks, or, she gestured vaguely. No attorney speak on my part. Just truth. I sat at the opposite end of the couch, maintaining careful distance. That sounds terrifying. That's rather the point. She took a deep breath. I'll start. Alina looked past me toward the window, where sunset painted the sky in deep purples. At your age, I was something else. Graduated top of my class, determined to change the world through environmental law. I was going to take down corrupt corporations, save endangered species, make headlines. She laughed softly. I worked 80-hour weeks at a nonprofit, dated inappropriate men, danced until dawn at least twice a week. I thought I was invincible. What changed? I asked, drawn in by this glimpse of a younger, wilder Alina. Love, I met David at a fundraiser. Suddenly, my priorities shifted. Marriage, Marcus, a more stable career track. Corporate law paid better, had regular hours. She touched her side absently. Though I kept one small rebellion. What do you mean? A hint of mischief crossed her face. Promise not to tell Marcus. I have a tattoo. A phoenix, right here. She traced her ribcage through the sweater. Got it in law school after winning my first major case. Only David ever knew about it. The intimacy of this confession made my throat tight. Elena's eyes met mine, expectant. Right. My turn. I haven't told anyone this, not even Marcus. I started, my voice rougher than I intended. The day I left engineering, my dad called me a coward. Said I was throwing away everything they'd sacrificed for. The memory still stung. They mortgaged the auto shop to pay for my education, you know? Their golden child, first one to college. But it wasn't making you happy, Alina said softly. She'd shifted closer, though I couldn't remember when. It was killing me. Slowly, but surely. Every equation, every lab, every perfect grade felt like another brick in a wall I was building around myself. The words came easier now, in this dim room with this woman who actually seemed to listen. I've never felt more lost than I do right now. But also, never more myself. Elena's hand rested on the couch between us. Close enough, I could see a small scar on her knuckle I'd never noticed before. Being lost isn't always bad, she said. Sometimes you have to lose your way to find a better path. We talked for hours after that, sharing stories that felt too real for daylight. Alina told me about the cases that kept her up at night, about watching Marcus grow up too fast after David died. I admitted how much I missed working with my hands at the shop, the simple satisfaction of fixing things. When the grandfather clock struck 11, Alina walked me to my room, our footsteps quiet. In the sleeping house. At my door, she hesitated. I watched her legendary control waver, noticed how her fingers twisted the edge of her sweater. Same time tomorrow. She whispered, the words carrying the weight of both question and promise. The air between us felt charged, delicate. Like one wrong move might shatter whatever this was becoming. Same time tomorrow, I echoed softly. 7 o'clock found us in Elena's study again, but something felt different. Maybe it was how she'd traded her usual professional armor for worn jeans and a cream sweater. or the way her hair escaped from a messy bun to soften her face. She looked younger, more touchable, more real. I forced my eyes away from a stray curl brushing her neck. No wine tonight either. I think we proved we don't need it. She curled into her corner of the couch, bare, feet tucked beneath her. Your turn to start. The casualness of her pose made this somehow harder. It was easier to share secrets with a controlled attorney version of Alina than this softer incarnation. But I'd promised truth. You know how I mentioned my parents mortgaged their shop for my education? My fingers traced patterns on the leather armrest. That wasn't the half of it. My grandparents emigrated here with nothing, worked cleaning offices at night so their kids could go to good schools. Mom learned English from soap operas while Dad helped in the shop after classes. Elena listened intently, her dark eyes never leaving my face. I was supposed to be their victory lap. First one to college, proving all their sacrifices meant something. My throat tightened. Instead, I'm the disappointment living in his friend's house, hiding from their calls because I can't stand hearing how confused they are, how worried. That's a heavy burden to carry, Elena said softly. Being someone's dream come true. Being someone's broken dream feels heavier. She was quiet for a long moment, absently twisting a ring on her right hand. I understand more than you'd think. Everyone has their assigned role, their expected performance. Her voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. The perfect widow, the perfect mother, handling everything with grace and strength, because that's what people need to see. The bitterness in her tone made me lean forward. Alina, do you know what people say? She's so strong, she's doing so well. As if strength was a choice. Her hands clenched. They don't see me screaming into my pillow at night because it's not fair. It's not fair that we finally figured out how to be happy, how to balance everything. And then she drew a shaky breath, a heart attack. 45 years old, and just gone. I'd never heard her talk about David like this. She mentioned him occasionally in passing, always with careful distance. But now we were going to travel when Marcus left for college. David had this ridiculous plan to buy a vintage Corvette, drive Route 66. Her voice cracked. He'd just started teaching me about cars, saying every lawyer should know basic maintenance. He'd laugh at how I still can't change a tire. The first tear fell, surprising us both. Elena touched her cheek like she couldn't believe her fingers came away wet. I'm sorry, I don't usually. She tried to turn away to rebuild her walls, but something in me couldn't bear watching her struggle alone. I moved without thinking, pulling her against my chest. She stiffened for a moment, and I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. Then she melted into me, her fingers gripping my shirt like she was drowning, and I was the only solid thing left. I held her while she cried. Quiet, dignified tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep and long buried. Her perfume wrapped around me, something expensive and subtle now, mixed with salt. One hand stroked her back, while the other cradled her head, my fingers tangling in escaped strands of her hair. This is a terrible idea, she whispered into my taint. She whispered into my shoulder, but made no move to pull away. The worst, I agreed, holding her tighter. We stayed like that, breaking every rule we'd set, crossing lines we'd drawn in careful ink. Elena's breath gradually steadied, but she didn't lift her head. I didn't dare move, afraid any shift might break this moment where pretenses fell away and left just us. Just this. Her fingers slowly unclenched from my shirt, smoothing the wrinkled fabric in an unconscious gesture. Still, she didn't pull back. If anything, she settled deeper into the embrace. Like she'd forgotten how to be held and was relearning it breath by breath. I knew we were in dangerous territory. Every heartbeat screamed it. But with Alina warm and real in my arms, tears drying on my shirt and her guard completely down. I couldn't bring myself to care about consequences. Alina's hand slowly uncurled from my shirt, but instead of pulling away, she tilted her head back to study my face. I'd never seen her look so unguarded. The careful control she wore like armor had cracked, revealing something raw and hungry underneath that made my breath catch. "I need to be very clear about something," she said, her attorney voice at odds with the tremor in her hands. "I don't do casual. I don't do uncertain. And I absolutely don't do regret." My thumb traced along her jaw before I could stop myself. Her breath hitched, but she caught my wrist, holding me still. "Listen to me," she continued. "I don't know how to do anything halfway. If we cross this line, if you cross it, you need to understand exactly what you're choosing. Alina, no." She pressed a finger to my lips. "Don't answer yet. I'm not your mentor or your friend's mother right now. I'm a woman telling you that if this happens, it happens on clear terms. I won't pretend it's something it's not, and I won't accept less than everything." The intensity in her dark eyes pinned me in place, but beneath the steel in her voice, I heard uncertainty, like she expected me to run once she laid out the truth. "I know who you are," I said softly, brushing my fingers over the hand still pressed to my lips. "You're not some maternal figure I'm confusing with attraction. You're the woman who laughs at 2 a.m. over wine and legal briefs, who cries for dreams she had to bury, who makes lists to keep the world in order when everything feels like chaos." Her breath caught again, but differently this time. "See you, Alina, not as Marcus's mom or David's widow or some authority figure. Just you." Something fierce and desperate flashed across her face. Then she was kissing me, and thought became impossible. There was nothing tentative about it. Alina kissed like she did everything else with absolute conviction and complete control. Her fingers threaded through my hair, holding me exactly where she wanted me as she claimed my mouth. I tasted wine and salt and hunger. Just as suddenly, she pulled back. Her lips were slightly swollen, a flush high on her cheeks, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Marcus comes home in 3 days." She said each word precise, despite her quickened breathing. "Whatever this is, it has a built-in expiration date. I need you to understand that too." The reminder of Marcus hit like ice water, but I couldn't look away from her. Couldn't pretend I didn't want this with an intensity that frightened me. Alina stood, smoothing her clothes with hands that weren't quite steady. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully neutral. "Come to my room tonight," she said, "or don't. But choose knowing there's no middle ground with me. It's no trying things out, no maybes, no taking it slow." She paused at the study door. "I'll expect your decision by midnight." Then she was gone, leaving me standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs and the ghost of her kiss on my lips. 3 hours to make what felt like the biggest decision of my life. The sensible choice was clear. Pack my bags. Call a friend. Be gone before I could complicate everyone's lives irreparably. The right choice, the safe choice, but I could still feel Elena's tears soaking my shirt, still taste her desperation and desire. Still see the vulnerability she showed, no one else. The clock on the mantel ticked steadily toward midnight, counting down the moments until I had to choose. I sat on my bed for hours, watching shadows crawl across the wall as evening deepened into night. Elena's terms echoed in my mind. No casual, no uncertain, no regret. The weight of the choice pressed against my chest until it was hard to breathe. Marcus's face kept appearing in my thoughts, his easy smile, his absolute trust when he'd offered me a place to stay. "Take care of my mom while I'm gone," he joked, not knowing how those words would haunt me. The friendship we'd built over years could shatter in an instant. But then I'd remember Elena's laugh that first night in the kitchen, rich and surprised, like she'd forgotten she was capable of it. The way her hands shook when she admitted she hadn't been alone with anyone since David died. How she looked at me sometimes, like I was seeing past her careful facades to the woman underneath. Not the widow, not the mother, not the attorney, but just Alina at 11:15. I paced my room, arguing with myself. This was insane. Reckless. The kind of decision that could destroy multiple lives with surgical precision. Alina herself had acknowledged the timer on whatever this was, 3 days until Marcus returned. 3 days to taste something real, before returning to our assigned roles and careful distance. 11:30 found me standing at my door, hand on the knob, still wrestling with doubt. I could hear the soft sounds of movement from upstairs. Alina in her room, maybe wondering if I'd choose the safe path, the sensible path. Maybe hoping I wouldn't. At 11:45, I stood outside her bedroom door, arm raised to knock, pulse thundering in my ears. Through the wood came the whisper of papers being shuffled, her eternal legal briefs, her armor against silence. I imagined her trying to focus on work while watching the clock tick toward midnight. Toward my decision, when the grandfather clock downstairs began to chime the hour. I knocked, soft but decisive, no hesitation left in the motion. The door opened. Immediately. Alina stood there in cream silk pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders. Legal documents were scattered across her bed, abandoned mid-review. Without her usual polish, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and infinitely more beautiful. "You came," she said quietly, surprise coloring her voice despite having set this moment in motion herself. "You doubt it?" I asked, taking a step into her room. "I hoped," she corrected, glancing away before meeting my eyes again with renewed determination. The admission seemed to cost her something, a crack in her careful control that made my heart twist. Her room held the same careful order as the rest of her life, files arranged in precise stacks, a place for everything. But there was softness to the subtle floral scent of her perfume, the warm glow of bedside lamps casting everything in gentle gold. Alina closed the door behind me with a quiet click. We stood there for a moment, the air between us charged with possibility and hesitation. "We should talk first," she said, moving to sit on the edge of her bed. She patted the space beside her, and I joined her, careful to leave a few inches between us. "I need you to understand something." Her hands twisted together in her lap, and I noticed they were trembling slightly. "I haven't since David," she began, then took a steadying breath. "This terrifies me and thrills me, both at once, if that makes any sense." "It does," I said softly. "I've never felt anything like this before, this pull. It's not just physical. It's like I searched for words to explain the inexplicable, like recognition, like finding something I didn't know I was missing." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "We need to be clear about boundaries," she said. "Lawyer precise, even now. What we're comfortable with, what we're not. I need to know you're certain." "I am," I assured her. "But you're right. Let's talk it through." So we did, with careful clarity. Each boundary discussed and agreed upon, each concern addressed. It should have felt clinical, but instead, it felt intimate. This mutual dedication to protecting each other, to doing this right. When she finally leaned in to kiss me, it was different from our earlier kiss. That had been claiming, decisive. This was a question, an exploration. Her lips moved against mine with exquisite slowness, like we had all the time in the world. Every touch felt like a conversation, souls learning each other's language through skin and breath. She pulled back, slightly, her hands coming up to frame my face. Her touch was so gentle it made my heart ache. "You're sure?" she whispered. "One final check." "Alina," I said, using her first name deliberately, watching her eyes darken at the intimacy of it. "I've never been more certain of anything." "Look." She gave me then vulnerable and powerful all at once, like I was simultaneously breaking and remaking her. Told me she felt it too. This earth-shifting certainty, this recognition of something rare and precious and impossible to deny, time, bent and flowed strangely in Elena's room, minutes stretching into eternities, then collapsing into heartbeats. The expensive sheets whispered against our skin as we shifted between kisses and conversations, each touch revealing another layer of truth. I didn't cry at the funeral, Elena confessed, her head resting on my chest. I organized everything. The flowers, the service, the reception. I made sure Marcus had his black suit pressed. I wrote thank you notes for every casserole and sympathy card. But I couldn't cry. I ran my fingers through her hair, something I'd wanted to do since that first night in the kitchen. When did you finally let yourself? 6 months later. Over. A coffee mug. She traced abstract patterns on my skin, her touch feather light. It was his favorite, this ugly thing with a chip in the rim. I went to put it in the donation box and just shattered. Spent 3 hours on the kitchen floor. After that, I think I forgot how to feel anything at all. Just went through the motions, running on autopilot. I understood that kind of numbness. When I dropped out, I said, everyone was so disappointed. But all I felt was relief, like I could finally breathe again. Found myself in the middle of failing everyone's expectations. Elena propped herself up on an elbow, studying my face in the dim light. And now I'm learning who I am without their dreams weighing me down. I traced the curve of her shoulder. What about you? Are you feeling again? Her laugh was soft. A little broken? Too much, maybe. Everything at once. We kept talking between kisses, sharing secrets that daylight would never permit. Each confession brought us closer, though we carefully maintained that last physical boundary. This night wasn't about crossing every line. It was about discovering each other's hearts. The first hint of dawn started creeping around her curtains when Elena's voice turned serious. Marcus comes home tomorrow, she said, her tone carefully neutral. I know, I replied, pulling her closer against me, feeling her heartbeat echo through my own chest. She was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "Stay until then?" The vulnerability in her voice made my throat tight. We both knew she wasn't just asking about the morning. Yes, I promised, the word holding all the weight of everything we weren't saying. Tomorrow would bring choices and consequences, but for now, we had this shared warmth, shared truth, shared understanding. Morning crept over Elena's private balcony in watercolor strokes. We sat sharing coffee, wrapped in a silence that felt more eloquent than words. I watched sunlight paint her skin in amber and gold. Mesmerized by how different she looked, her usual corporate armor replaced by something softer, more real. Her hand rested over mine on the balcony rail, thumb drawing lazy circles that felt like unspoken promises. Neither of us mentioned Marcus's return or what came next. The understanding lived in the quiet between breaths. Elena slid a piece of paper across the small table, her signature daily list. But this one held just a single word. Stay. Not a command like her usual instructions, but a question mark. An invitation to choose complexity over safety, I thought. About my empty apartment waiting across town. About my life's current lack of direction. About Marcus's friendship that hung in the balance. Then I looked at Elena, this fascinating, brilliant woman who somehow saw me completely and wanted me anyway. We'll have to tell Marcus, I said, the words falling somewhere between acceptance and uncertainty. Eventually, she agreed, leaning into my shoulder. But first, we figure out what this is. I felt the weight of possibility in that moment, terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. I heard the distinctive rumble of Marcus's car in the driveway, and felt Elena tense beside me. In moments, she transformed, shoulders straightening, smile shifting to something more controlled. I slipped away to my room, heart pounding. Marcus burst through the door with his usual energy. "Mom, Jamie, you would not believe this conference." Over his mother's famous lasagna. Marcus rattled off stories while I tried not to stare at Alina. She maintained perfect composure. But I caught her watching me with an expression that made my pulse race. "Hey, I was thinking," Marcus said, stretching. "Maybe I should stick around longer, help Jamie figure things out." Alina set down her wineglass carefully. "That's his decision to make." The weight of those words hung between us. After Marcus crashed from travel exhaustion, I found Alina in the kitchen, where everything began. She stood at the island, hair down like that first night. "I meant it," she said simply. "Stay." I took her hand, feeling the future reshape itself around this moment. "Okay." Outside, dawn painted the sky pink, marking the beginning of something new. If this story found you at the right time, subscribe and set reminders. Tomorrow's might be the nudge, the hug, or the promise you've been waiting for.